In this video, I would like to give you 5 tips of how to use a metronome for music lessons. My name is Diego, and recently I came out of a class and started talking to a parent of a student of mine that has been having a good amount of difficulty playing steady. Now I started talking about using a metronome, and the parent looked at me like he had no clue what I was talking about. So I wanted to put this video together as a way of helping our customers understand what are the benefits and how you should use a metronome for music lessons. Let's go to a close-up of the piano so we can get started. So let's start by what is a metronome. A metronome is simply a machine that clicks in order to give us time to be able to give us the pacing of the notes. So I have here a metronome. This is called a Pro Metronome, and it's an app. It's available, I believe, for both iOS and at the same time Android. And you can put it on an iPad, you can also put it on a phone. Now when you press it, it clicks. The clicking, you can change a little bit how it sounds, and you can change the speed. On this specifically, if you want to change the speed, you go around the dial. You can make it faster, and of course you can make it slower if you go backwards. So one thing that we definitely want out of this is that the student can probably see it, because as you see here, there's a little pendulum that moves from one side to the other. And we believe that when students are young, sometimes just listening to it gives them issues into being able to keep up. So having one that has that type of pendulum can be very beneficial, because the student, if they have someone memorize the song, can actually play the song or the piece while looking at the screen and trying to match that pendulum. So that, I think, is very important. So let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is don't use at the beginning of a song. Don't use at the beginning of learning a song. So I'm going to use a couple of songs that are part of our books just to give you an idea. So let's say, for example, you're doing Ode to Joy and you're just starting out and it's sounding a little bit like, and you still are not clear how it goes. To put a metronome when you are not clear at the beginning of practicing something, we don't believe it's a good idea. So you want to get a little bit familiar to the point that you can probably play it, let's say 3 times without being able to mess up, and then put a metronome. Number 2 tip, I think, would be to practice extra slow. So let's go back to that speed. Let's say a Shawn Mendes song is at 122. You already practice a little bit, you kind of like have it, but are having difficulty. I would start at 80 probably. Because what happens is at the beginning of, let's say, I don't know, a song like maybe Señorita, you're trying to do the right hand. If that is too fast for you, the trick about the metronome is to use it extra slow. Slow enough that you're actually working out a little bit, but not to the point that the metronome is making you miss or play incorrectly every time. I think if you're playing incorrectly 3-4 times in a row, you're not ready for the metronome. And I think that to me is a good gauge of, like, if you can do it 3 times in a row without making mistakes, you can probably start the metronome. If not, we definitely don't suggest to put it on, because it's almost like an added pressure that can create other problems. So definitely we want to try to encourage you guys, always try to put it extra slow. Now, number 3, and this I think is a very important tip, is to actually document the speed that you are trying to play at. So for example, let's say today is the first day that you're practicing a song, you got it a little bit together, and maybe the speed that you can play it is 68. So we encourage you guys to write 68 in the actual paper and maybe put the date on it. That way, you know, maybe next week you can crank it up to 76. And then if you're playing that same song. Now for this specific song, we believe, I think it's around 120 for the actual recording. So like, look at the difference between, 120 or 118 and the speed that I was doing. But absolutely, you need to get to the speeds that you can control, and you need to go in steps. I would say when you're jumping speeds, probably in 5. So let's say if you have trouble 90, try it there until you get good, then maybe 95. You can tweak a little bit less, but it's almost similar to exercise. You do want to push yourself a little bit, because if not, growth is not going to happen. So I think that is very important. So tip number 4 would be to always try to use the function of the tapping, so you can actually get the speed of the recording. Documenting the speed of the recording, let's say the recording is 120, and definitely trying to push yourself to match it. We have a good amount of students that bring songs back, and the problem is that they can play them, but they can play it extremely slowly. And for example, when we have bands, the fact that you can play it well slowly, it's a little bit almost useless, because when we have a rehearsal, we can't slow down the song for the keyboard player or for the drummer. So it is super important that you push yourself to the point that if you do have a rehearsal and there are other people involved, that you get to the timing of the song, to the tempo of the song. And I think this is all about writing it, because if not, it's probably gonna just end up being a little bit like random. So if you have no idea if the song is 90 or 110, it's harder for you to try to get to the, I guess, to the finish line. Okay, and another really cool tip that I have is, and this is a lot more advanced, but it's technically the way that you can really become good at playing with metronome and even sight reading as well, is to count out loud. So if you're playing, let's say, Otto Joy, let's go back to that one, put it like, let's say at 75. When you're playing the line, you should go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So what happens when you count? When you count and you look at the paper, it's a lot easier to know if the note is landing on 1, is landing on 3. So even you can have, with the help of your teacher, to put on the paper, okay, this note lands on 4. If you're counting out loud, it's a lot easier to know if you're making mistakes. At the same time, we see this all the time with our students. It is very challenging to count out loud and play, because it's almost like an added pressure, an added almost like hand involved in the process. So absolutely, definitely very slowly. So if you're gonna count out loud, you should do it slowly. And one thing that I see with my students is when you count out loud, you actually have to say it loud enough that you can hear it. I have a lot of students that start and go like almost 1, 2, 3, and almost stop counting. And then start 1, 2, and it's very important that you count all the way through. So counting can really make you a much better musician. You're not gonna count in a show, you're not gonna count forever. You're counting a little bit when you're assembling things with the metronome. So that is another good tip. And let me finish here with a very interesting bonus tip, especially about this specific app. You can change the sound of the metronome. So if you press play, go here into settings, you can change the tone. And the tone, you can make it different things. One thing that I really like is that the machine itself can say the numbers.
3, 4, 1, 2.
So sometimes for younger students, and I guess for all of us, having the actual numbers being counted can be really beneficial. So I would almost suggest that sometimes you can change it to that, depending on the song, depending if you're having too much trouble, and then go back to the other one. So it's important to be able to know. I'm not familiar with a lot of other metronome apps, but this one is cool because it can do that. And at the same time, it's a free app, so you can get it and it can do all these functions without having to pay for it. We hope this video helped you understand how to use a metronome properly. A metronome can be a great device if you use it correctly. So we hope the pointers in this video can get our students to have a little bit more clarity of what is the process like. At the same time, remember, if you want any other topics for us to cover them, please leave it in the comments, and we truly hope to see you guys on the next video. Take care.